الأحجار دي فوق بكر من الخشب، حاجة تضحك. ده طبعا كلام فارغ. ازاي تجر قطعة جرانيت واحدة وزنها لوحده 70 طن على بكر خشب، وبتجرها على ايه؟ على طوب ني، على ساتر ترابي؟ طب ازاي؟ محال. انت عشان تعمل الحكاية دي لازم الاول تعمل تبة خرسانية، وبعدين تجيب جرارات بعجلات ستيل، يعني صلب، عجلات صلب، وبعدين يبتدوا كم واحد يجر بقى 100,000 عامل طبعا يجروا، واخد بالك هيقفوا فين على الساتر الترابي دول. وبعدين ازاي بقى البكر الخشب ده يتغرز، وكله يغرز وكله يقع ويغطس، مش ممكن. فدي في الواقع سذاجات.
Alright, so moving a megalith with primitive technology, Mussolini's Monolith, 250 tons, not including the weight of the casing and the sled, but coming down the mountain. Now note that it's tied at the back, so there's some descriptions. You don't have oxen or team of men pulling from the front when you're going downhill, because this thing, if it runs away from you, it's going to run them over. But notice a primitive technique as depicted in ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. You bring rails from the front and you put them, rails from the back, and you put them there at the front. And you have a cranky foreman who knows what he's doing and he's making sure everyone's working in line. That's number one. So this massive megalith would be one of the heaviest ever moved in history. Over 250 tons because of the weight of the case and the sled itself. And I think it's closer to 300, but let's say 250. Rails from the front, from the back, bring them to the front. If you ever hear that wooden rails would crush even the 1,200 ton block, that is just a nonsense. Like, just ask what their sources are, because you can go into any technical database, get up the modulus value, crush value of timbers. They will absolutely support these, and it's again like here. Okay, here's the evidence for it. It's a huge block of marble. Marble weighs the same or more than granite, so you can't sort of say, oh well, it's marble, not granite. It's even more difficult in that sense. But these guys they didn't move these blocks every day. This was a very rare special event because people weren't ordering it. Why don't people build with megaliths now? Well, people aren't investing in it. But with the modern tech we have now, if we wanted to, we'd just be throwing these things around. Fibre rope will support it. As it's going down the mountain, you could use a friction knot, so a bit like mountain climbers use. You know, when if someone falls, you can pull it. It gives friction on the rope and they stop dead. So, or you could just use a reverse crane and have capstans and pulleys and let it down slowly. So the issue of the rope or the timber simply isn't one. People who know what they're doing, you know, so they're moving big blocks regularly, not this big, but those skills translate over. So a lot of these I've seen reconstructions done by people who have read a bit, but go to an old timer, go to someone with experience. If I want to, as my brother says, if I want to learn about milking a cow, I'll go to a dairy, not to someone who's written their thesis on milking. So this is them moving it. Now, then there's another really tricky issue that's going to come. How did they steer this? So here because they were lowering it from behind and they could twist, they had a bit of an angle there, but to do really more delicate turns than this, and we'll see that in a moment how they do that. But again, this is a huge block. All but the largest obelisks in Egypt, which people fascinate over, no doubt. How were they moved? Well, this block is as heavy as those, and it's coming down a mountain. Unlike Egypt or any other place where these big blocks were moved, they were basically moved across horizontal ground. Very short distance from the quarry to the river. Then a very short distance from the river to the final site. This block was moved 17 miles, much, much further than any of the, whether it's Baalbek or Egypt or any of these other blocks. They simply weren't moved a large distance. But now we can get into the nitty-gritty of it a bit and look at what's really going on. They're using 80 oxen. Unlike people, the oxen can't be synchronized. So another thing is about breaking the inertia. It's once the block gets moving, it moves really easy. Now see they're all tugging, they're all pulling, they're really trying to get this thing moving. And once they go, well, they're just at walking speed. I'll put the link. I did one on the megalith movers of Sumba who carry on this ancient tradition. They had the same problem. They'd be tugging, jerking on the rope, and then once the thing moves and the inertia's gone, the conservation of momentum, I think it's called, then the thing just wants to keep moving. So the oxen were to break the inertia, and because unlike humans they can't be synchronized with a chant so well, you need only so many of the oxen will be pulling at one time. And also as they're coming down the mountain, there's one somewhere in Switzerland, but there is no mountain road that goes directly straight down at a constant angle. If you're going down a mountain, that means you're coming up as well. So in this clip I'll put the whole link to the whole compilation I put together on it. They're also moving uphill, so this is not just a downhill exercise. It's all mountain roads. A little bit, you go down for a mile and then you go a couple hundred feet up. You go down for a mile, couple hundred feet up. So it's not just, well, they're going downhill. No, they're also going uphill and over a much larger distance than any overland than any of those blocks were moved as well. But no, they're travelling through these very narrow streets, steering this thing through. If this wasn't being steered accurately, they'd be tearing the walls off all of those buildings. Again, you'll see the twists and the turns, and this is a primitive ancient technique, so it's still being practiced in Sumba, but there's a couple other points. Now I'll do some illustrations in a moment, but notice closely that the rails are at an angle, so it's not just laid flat on the ground. You have rails running parallel to the movement of the block, and then the rails like a V where they're turned in, and that just like a train line, and I'll show you that in a moment, just like why train wheels are at an angle. If you set your rails up like that, especially on corners, the block is going to go exactly where you tell it to. You don't need to put massive forces pulling and tugging on the sides to try and twist and turn it and to get it where you want to go.
يعني يعملوا اللي بيسموه دلوقتي الانتاي جرافيتي، حاجه تضحك. ده طبعا كلام فارغ،
فعلا حديث كلام فارغ، في حديث كلام فارغ.
الاحجار دي فوق بكر من الخشب، حاجه تضحك. ده طبعا كلام فارغ. على ايه؟ على طوب ني، على ساتر ترابي. طب ازاي؟ محال يقع ويغطس، مش ممكن. فدي في الواقع سذاجات. يعني يعملوا اللي بيسموه دلوقتي الانتاي جرافيتي، الانتاي جرافيتي، حاجه تضحك. ده طبعا كلام فارغ. طب ازاي؟ محال. سذاجات، حاجه تضحك. ده طبعا كلام فارغ.
فعلا حديث كلام فارغ، في حديث كلام فارغ.
هم بينسبوا له خوفه لمجرد انهم شافوا خرطوش مكتوب عليه خرم خوفه، لكن خرم خوفه معناها بالهيروغليفيه الله جل جلاله. الله.
It is very hard for archaeologists to explain how that was done using purely leverage and mechanical advantage. You can say, oh, perhaps they built a ramp and hauled the stones up the ramp. But then you have to confront basic laws of physics. You can't haul a stone weighing tens of tons up a slope that exceeds 10 degrees. Then you start doing the calculation. How long a ramp do I need with a 10-degree slope to get to 350 feet above the ground? Just dismiss all of that because science says it's impossible.
Yes, science!
Okay. A few moments later.
Maybe they cultivated powers of the human mind that we dismiss.
Both of those sound equally preposterous.
And regard as completely unimportant. You know, woo-woo.
Fuck you, science!
When you have an idea and it's in your head, it's very difficult for people to shake that idea, and they start arguing that idea becomes a part of their identity.
But we hear anecdotal reports.
We've got all this, evidence
of people who have telekinetic powers, who can move things with their minds, of people who have telepathic powers. And our automatic reaction is to just dismiss all of that because science says it's impossible. But then you have to confront basic laws of physics, who can move things with their minds. Basic laws of physics. So
people who don't have any education, and then they watch one of these YouTube clips, they start actually believing that this stuff makes sense because it's unchecked.
And our automatic reaction is to just dismiss all of that because science says it's impossible. Well, hang on. Maybe there would have been maybe the idea that they regard as absurd, maybe that idea are anecdotal reports of maybe we could wake those techniques up.
Well, it's pure speculation.
For pseudo-archaeologists, Europeans could have accomplished their feats on their own, but non-Europeans must have had outside guidance.